It's interesting because I believe you wrote a book on Ali and Malcolm X, I believe.
That's right.
And I always had this theory about Jordan and those guys in that era, and I don't think it comes up too often. Ali lost a lot when he spoke up. And
Right.
and part of me feels like these guys who grew up watching Ali, even though they admired him, when it came time for these guys to make money, they realized what happened to him as a black man. If you speak up, this is what happens to you. Yeah, bless you.
Yeah.
So sometimes when I look at Jordan, I often wonder, it's like, is that part of it too? Did he grow up watching what happened to Ali, and maybe he went through this lane of, I'm not going to offend anybody just
Right.
because I'm partly a capitalist, but at the same time, I saw how damaged Ali was, even up to his death. Even though when people came around later, he didn't really get the endorsements he deserved. They took him out of his prime as a boxer. So I often wonder, not just Jordan, most of those guys in that generation really didn't speak up much about anything, maybe except for maybe Craig Hodges and a few other people. It wasn't until LeBron and the Heat in 2012 that things started to change. And that's a big, long gap. So it wasn't just Jordan.
Totally, Kevin. I think context is crucial here, as you point out, that think about what happens in the late 70s. That's when free agency comes to professional sports. So the economics of the sporting world is changing in that period, in the post-Ali era, really, right? If you think about the height of Ali, maybe 1975 with the Thrilla in Manila. But then after that, his career is going to be on the downward end. So you have free agency changing the economics of professional sports in the second half of the 70s. And at the same time, in the late 70s and early 80s, the NBA is in trouble. Economically, the league appears to investors, advertisers, and the owners to not be appealing to a predominantly white audience. And there are stories circulating in the press that this is a league that's 75% black, and that these players are quote unquote lazy, unmotivated, self-absorbed, too focused now on their contracts in this period of free agency. And the worst part is that the majority of them supposedly are using drugs, cocaine in particular. And so it created this image crisis for the league. 2/3 of the NBA franchises were in the red. It's in trouble. And so by the time of, say, 1983, 1984, when David Stern makes the transition as becoming NBA commissioner, he recognizes he has to rehabilitate the image of the league to make it attractive to Madison Avenue advertisers and the television networks. That's his number one goal, because ultimately what happens is it's television where the NBA owners make their money. By 1990, David Stern would say that 80% of our revenue comes from TV. And that's in the age of cable, and that's growing the audience for the sport, on and on. So how does this all pertain to Jordan? In order for Jordan to achieve this universal acceptance, he has to position himself as the antithesis of the militant, politically outspoken black athlete, as the antithesis of the sort of drug-using NBA player who is really faceless in many ways to the larger white sports public. But he's acutely aware of the fact that when he comes to the Bulls in 1984, there is no demand from corporations to make black basketball players their spokesman. But what David Falk is able to do, his agent, is to get him some deals that make sense for the companies. And the first two he does, Nike and Wilson. And Falk's point is, look, these deals make a lot of sense because Jordan is seen as an authentic spokesman. He's not having to be something he's not. He's a basketball player. It makes sense for him to sell basketball shoes with Nike and basketballs with Wilson. The Nike deal in particular was crucial because Nike invested a significant amount of money in Jordan in a way that no other footwear company had ever done. That gave Falk some leverage. Jordan's appearing on TV in 1985. And so these other companies now that have nothing to do with sports, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Chevrolet, Falk's position is, look, you have less risk now. The public recognizes Jordan now because he's on television more from these Nike commercials, and he's selling these shoes. When Jordan signed the Nike deal, this is just remarkable. When he signed the original Nike deal, it was a 5-year deal. And basically, he has 3 years to sell a significant figure of shoes. I think it was something like $3 million. And by the end of the first year, they sold well over $100 million of Nike shoes. So now what Jordan has done with Nike's demonstrate he can move product. So that's going to catch the eye of the executives at McDonald's and Coca-Cola and Chevrolet. And so they invest in him. And so this is kind of the snowball effect that's happening. But I try to remind readers in Jumpman, this was highly unusual. Yes, Julius Erving had a number of endorsement deals, as did Magic Johnson, but they were really the exception. And the fact is that both Irving and Magic and Isaiah Thomas and Larry Bird, they were all with Converse, and Converse did not put out a single line investing dollars to distinguish a Julius Erving shoe, for example, in the way that Nike did with the Air Jordan sneaker. So there is a transformation taking place. And all of this is taking place in an age where major Black celebrities in the mid to late 1980s recognize that they cannot alienate the white buying public. And Jordan is acutely aware of that. He gave this interview in 1989 to a GQ reporter where he says that basically he's afraid, his biggest fear in life is that he'll make some grave mistake where white parents will tell their white kids, you can't admire this man. He's made a mistake. And that would, quote, change me from Michael Jordan, the basketball player, to Michael Jordan, the black guy. And so that, I think, is part of the story that is completely missing from The Last Dance. It's completely missing from these narratives where Jordan's racial consciousness undoubtedly shaped the way he presented himself to the public, the way he engaged the political arena, and why the public, the white public, we should say, saw him as a hero who was non-threatening. He didn't seem to harbor any racial resentment. He wasn't like those quote-unquote coked out black players that preceded him. And so that's all part of the narratives that are swirling around Jordan when he comes to the league and through the 80s.